Masechet Baba Batra, Daf Samech Aleph, we begin the fourth perek. Hamocher et habayit lo machar yasiya, v'af al pi shehi petucha letocho. So if I sell you a house, and so I write in the deed, I'm selling you a house. Does that include everything that's on the property? It does not. It only includes that dwelling place, that's the house. So if there is a yasiya, we're going to discuss exactly what the yasiya is, but it's some kind of annex or extension to the house, like in this picture. Let's say this is the main house that I am selling you, and then there's an added room that you could live in. And even though the access point to that extra room is inside the house, nevertheless, it's an annex and not technically part of the house, and therefore that we do not assume that that is included in the sale. So you get the house, but you do not get the annex. And also, if I sell a house, and let's say there is an extension, another room that's extended behind the house, it's kind of like a separate quarters. And again, even if it's accessible from within the house, nevertheless, that's like a separate apartment. And so I sold you the main house and not the other one. The Gemara will discuss why it has to have both of these cases of the extra gallery or little extra room, the annex, and the over here the extra room that sounds like a bigger separate room. And also, if I sell you the house, we do not assume that it includes the roof. Of course, the roof itself is part of the house, but it means the usage of the rooftop if there is a fence that is 10 tefachim high around it. 10 tefachim, which if the roof is usable space, then you have to put a 10 tefachim high fence anyway because of ma'akeh, for safety. So if it is a separate use, then that is not included in the sale. That means I, as the seller, I want to keep that for myself, or I want to sell it to somebody else. So the inside residence is one thing, that's what I'm selling, and the usage of the rooftop to put fruit out to dry, or whatever I want to use it for, to sit in the sun, that is considered a separate usage, a separate area, and we do not assume that's included in the sale, unless you write specifically in the deed, I'm including the house and I'm including the rooftop, otherwise not. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im yesh lo surat petach, Rabbi Yehuda has a slightly different opinion about the roof. And he says if the roof has an entrance that has the form of a doorway, then even if the fence around it is lower than 10 tefachim, also it is not considered sold. In other words, let's say you have some kind of a staircase that goes up and an opening up here. Sometimes you can access the roof, let's say from a ladder and a trap door. So that's in that case, it's a separate area. But let's say if it has a ladder or a staircase and it goes into a little room, and then you enter onto the rooftop from a doorway. Imagine there's a doorway up here. Well, then that's considered for sure a separate area. And in that case, even if the walls are lower than 10 tefachim, it's considered a separate area. So Rabbi Yehuda is on the one hand agreeing with Tanakama that if it has 10 tefachim high walls, that's considered a separate area and is not sold. And he's adding another condition, that even if the walls are lower, but it has its own entranceway, then that's also considered a separate area and not included in the standard sale. Gemara asks, "Ma yasiya? Hacha targimu apeta." So what is a yasiya? So here in Bavel, they actually say it's an attic. So not a room on the side, but rather so within the structure of the home. Let's say there's 2 floors, and there's the top floor is an attic area. So that is considered, according to that interpretation, a separate area. If I sell you the house, I sell you the main floor of the house, but there's a little attic where someone could sleep and live there, that we assume is not included in the sale. Rav Yosef Amar Bidka Halila. Rav Yosef, however, says it's talking about a windowed structure, like this picture here. So they have like a veranda or an area that's open. When they say windows, they mean not glass, but just open space. So you want to sit out there, it's nice and shade, and you get cross currents. And this area, you could live there, you could sit there and sleep there, nice in the summer, and also the entranceway is from inside. That's what that's talking about according to Rav Yosef. Now let's compare these two opinions. Leman da'amar apeta la mizdabena, kol sheken bidka chalila la mizdabena. According to the opinion that says that this yatzia is an attic, and an attic is assumed that it's not part of the main house and not included in the sale, then all the more so if it was a veranda that's outside of the structure of the house and attached to it, that certainly would be considered a separate area. If even the attic, which is under the same roof, it's basically the same structure, if you consider that a separate dwelling place, and not included in the sale, then all the more so the veranda that's attached. However, according to Rav Yosef, that says it's an annexed veranda area, and that's not included, well then he would say the attic is included automatically in the sale, because otherwise you'd say attic. And so if the Mishnah is only talking about the annex that's used for living, on the side of it, that's what's not included, but the attic, which is under the same roof, part of the very same structure, would be automatically included in the sale of the house. Taneh Rav Yosef, shalosh shemot yesh lo, yasiya, sela, ta. Rav Yosef, who says that it's an attached chamber, says that the word yatzia has two other synonyms. It can be called yatzia, or sela, or ta, and they all refer to the same thing, as some kind of a gallery. How do we know? Yatzia, dichtiv, hayatzia tachtona, chamesh pa'ama rochba. The pasuk in Sefer Melachim that's talking about the first Bet HaMikdash built by Shlomo says that it had the galleries, and the bottom one was 5 cubits wide, and then there was one on top. Here's a picture of what that looks like. So here's the Bet HaMikdash itself. And then besides that, there's some galleries that were used for storage, and the bottom one was 5 amot, and then the next one was 6 amot, and so it talks about the sizes. So you see that this is like a side area, a gallery, or a shed, or a little room, and there happens to be in this Mishnah, Rav Yosef says that it's an open area, veranda, but that's the point. It's a little attachment that's on the side of a house or of a building. So that's called yatzia, and the word sela means the same thing. Dichtiv, v'aselaot sela el sela shalosh ushloshim pe'amim. In Sefer Yechezkel, when he's talking about the future Bet HaMikdash, he's also describing these side chambers that are one over the other, and he uses the word sela. Ta dichtiv hata kaneh echad orech v'kaneh echad rochav uben hataim chamesh amot. Also in Yechezkel describing the future Bet HaMikdash, it talks about the cells that were one reed long, one reed wide, and the space was between the cells was 5 cubits. So he's also talking about these extensions, side areas that were used for storage, and uses a word ta, but they're all referring to the same type of structure. Or if you don't want to derive it from the Yechezkel, you could also derive it from the Mishnah itself, because Mishnah describing the second Bet HaMikdash says that the wall of the sanctuary was 6 cubits, and the cell that was in the back of it, that was there for storage room, was this big, and it calls it also a ta. So we see that these are 3 synonyms. Amar Mozutra, v'hu tehaveh arba amot. Mozutra has a limitation on the Mishnah. When we say that this side room, the annex, is not considered part of the sale, that's only if that annex is at least 4 by 4 amot wide. Then it can be considered a substantive area, a chashuv area, one that you could live in. You can put a bed in there and whatever you need, a chair. So then it's 4 by 4, that's considered a separate area, not included in the sale. But if it's smaller than that, then that's just a tiny shed or a closet, and that's not considered a separate area, and that would be sold together with the house, even if it's not specified. Amar le Ravina lemor zutra, לדדחת אמרת עד ההווה 4 אמות, אלא מעתה גבר בור דתנן. לא את הבור ולא את הדות, אף על פי שכתב לו עומקה ורומה, הכי נמה יהוו 4 אמות אין la. Ravina challenges Mor Zutra, and he says, according to you, that you say that if it's less than 4 amot, this shed area, then it's included in the sale. How will you explain the following Mishnah that's going to come up in a couple of dapim in this perek? And regarding a pit, the Mishnah teaches that if I sell you a house, you do not get the pit or the cistern that's near the house, or even in the house. Even though I wrote in the document that I'm selling you the house, its depth and its height. That's referring to, let's say there's a basement or there's a second floor. So I'm selling you the entire house all the way down and all the way up, all of the living space. But a cistern and a pit, that's not living space, that's a separate thing. And therefore, that's not included. So here's the question. Would you say also there that if it has to be 4 amot, if it's 4 amot wide, square, then it's not included in the sale. But if it's smaller, if it's smaller than that, then it is included in the sale. That would be very strange because most pits are not so big. They're less than 4 by 4 amot, which means pretty much all the time the pit would be included in the sale, and that would basically erase the impact of this Mishnah that says not a board, but a standard board is smaller. And if you apply your limitation that you made to the shed also to the pit, then pretty much every pit would be included in the sale, and this Mishnah would not be teaching anything. So that's the question. And Mozutra answers, Hachi ashta, you cannot compare the shed to the pit. Hatam hatash mishta lechud v'hatash mishta lechud. There in that Mishnah, the usage of the pit is different from the usage of the home. The home is used for living in, sleeping, eating, sitting, whereas the pit or the cistern is used for storing water. So that's completely different. In that case, even if it's smaller, the pit is smaller than 4 by 4, it's not included in the sale because it's not living quarters. Hacha idi v'idi chada tashmishtahi ihave arba amot chashib v'ila la chashib. Whereas here, in the case of the shed, where I made my original statement, Mozutra says, they're both used for the same thing. They're both residential areas. So if it's 4 by 4 amot, then that's considered a significant space that you can call it its own separate space. A lot of times people may have a home and they have a separate side room that they rent out to others. So it's not officially part of the house. If it's 4 by 4, then significant enough to be a separate area, not included in the sale. But if it's smaller than that, then that's not a room that you could use and rent out. That's just like a shed or closet, side area, and therefore is not significant in and of itself enough to be excluded from the sale. So the Mishnah taught something about this annex that's on the side, and it also said that if there's another room behind the house, that also is not included in the sale. So maybe it's somewhat of a separate structure, right? What is this room that we're talking about? So we ask, it seems obvious. If even a small annex has to be at least 4 by 4, at least according to Mozutra. But if even a small annex is considered a separate area and not included in the sale, then a whole room that certainly would not be included in the sale, especially if it's not attached or if it has its own entranceway. That would not be included in the sale. Why do you even need to bother telling me about a cheder if I already know the law about a yasiyah? And the answer is, and so the answer is that it would not be necessary, but the Mishnah includes this to teach us an extra chidush, that even if the seller in the document says the borders, and the borders are wide borders. Let's say there's a house over here, and there's a room over here on the right side, and the borders, he uses the borders, let's say, of like the whole screen, and he says, I'm selling you the house that's within these borders, and he gives the west and the north and the east, and when he gives the borders, that room is included in the borders. So I might have thought that since he's giving these broad borders and the room is included, that means that the main home and the extra room are also included in the sale. That's why the Mishnah has to teach us, no, not the room, even though he gave large borders. Sometimes sellers do that. They write it in a general way. The house that's on this land that's within these borders. But they only sold the house. They're not selling the field, because it says in the deed, I'm selling you the house that's within these borders. Now, so even though the borders are bigger, that's just a general way of indicating where the house is, but it doesn't mean that it's including every structure that's on that land within those borders. If I said house, I mean only the house and not the extra room that's on the side of the house. Kid Rav Nachman, Tamar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abu, Hamocher bait lachavero bebira gedola, af al pi shemasar lo mesarim chitzonim, mesarim hirchib lo. And this principle that sometimes people indicate boundaries that are larger than the actual thing that they want to sell, we see backed up in the statement of Rav Nachman, who said, in the name of Rabba bar Avu, if I'm selling you something called a bayit, here in this case it will be an apartment, a dwelling place, to my friend in a large building. In other words, you have, let's say, an apartment building, and I'm selling you, apartment 3A within this larger building. So when I write down the borders, the boundaries, I might write down large boundaries that include the entire building. But obviously, I'm not selling you the entire building because I said bayit. If I'm selling you the building, I have to write bira. I'm selling you the building. So we don't say that, oh, well, let's look at the borders. And you say, all right, the borders includes the whole block here. So that means I'm selling you the entire building. No, because I said bayit, we assume I'm only selling you that one apartment 3A, and the fact that I gave borders that are larger is because that's the way that you indicate where the building is in a general way, in a broad manner, but only that home is sold. So too here, when you have a main building, a main home, house and a side room, even though the borders that I indicated were bigger, still I wrote, I'm selling you a bayit, only the house and not the side room. Now we ask about Rav Nachman. Hechidame, what are the particulars of the case? Ilema dekaru le bayit, bayit ulbira bira pishita. Bayit zabin le bira la zabin le. If you're in a place where, let's see how people use language. If people say, when they say residence, they mean a residence, literally what it means, meaning just a home or apartment, and that's how they use that word. And they always call a building, and they never switch between the definitions of these two words. Then this would be obvious. Why would Rav Nachman even have to teach us this? Obviously, he said, I'm selling you a dwelling place, meaning an apartment, and he did not say building. If he wanted to sell the building, you have to say building and use the language appropriately. So if you're in a place where they use these words always in a separate way, then this would be obvious and not needed you wouldn't need to even teach us this. Ela delbira name karula bayit. How, on the other hand, let's say you're in a place where a building is also called a bayit. The word bayit has two meanings in this area, in this place, in the way people use language. You use a residence, and residence could mean just an apartment or a single home, but residence could also mean the residential building, all of the apartments. In that case, if people use the word bayit synonymously with the word building, right, that the word bayit can refer to a building, and he indicated the borders in a large way, he indicated the entire block, then the halacha would not be what Rav Nachman says, because then he would be selling him the entire building, because you said bayit, and bayit can have a meaning of building, and you gave the bigger borders, then you would not say that he gets only one apartment. He would in fact get the whole building. So which one is it? If it's they use the language precisely, then it's obvious. If it's a place where they use the language not precisely, but bayit means both, then this halacha would not be true. So how do we answer? La sericha deruba karule lebayit bayit ulbira lebira vikaname delbira karule bayit maudetema kule zabin le kamashmalan midhava le lemichtav vela shayerit bezbine ilen kelum vela katab shemamina shiure shier. So the answer is Rav Nachman's ruling was talking about a case where you're in a place where most people use the language distinctly, and when they refer to a residence, they say bayit, one apartment, and when they refer to a building, they use the word bida. But there are a few people, a minority of people in that area, in that city, that they call a building by the word bayit also. So the word bayit is a little bit ambiguous. Standard definition is it means just an apartment. But there are some people, it's not so unusual, you can find people that will refer to a building as bayit. And therefore, the deed is somewhat ambiguous. So I might have thought that, since some people call a whole building a bayit, maybe it means that he sells the entire thing because he wrote bigger borders. And that's why Rav Nachman has to come teach us that because the seller did not write in the document that I am not withholding for myself anything. See, if he really wanted to sell the entire building, then he would write, I'm selling you this bayit. And maybe he means by bayit, he means the whole building. And he puts the big borders around the whole block. if he really wants to sell the whole building, he would need to write also, I am not withholding for myself anything at all. I'm not keeping not one apartment for myself. You are getting everything. From the fact that he did not put this language in, it means that he is withholding some of the building for himself. And so that's shiureh shier, he's withholding something for himself, and that means that he's not using bayit in the secondary definition of referring to a whole house, but rather, or referring only to an apartment. And so now we understand, now we clarified Rav Nachman's ruling. He says something else. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba bar Abu. He's going to say a similar law, but this time applied to a field. המוכר שדה לחברו בבקעה גדולה, אף על פי שמסר לו מסרים חיצוניים, מסרים הרחיב לו. Someone sells to someone else a field, and he owns an entire valley, a whole expanse of field. So I own this entire expanse, and I write you a document, and I say I'm selling you a field. Now, when I delineate the boundaries, I don't write the boundaries of that particular field, the 100 feet from here, and that way 100 feet. I don't write that, but rather I write the boundaries of the entire valley. Now, even though I wrote down boundaries that are very large, we assume that I was writing in a general way, a broad manner of, I'm selling you a field within this valley, and the valley is all across here and there, and I wrote the big boundaries. But I didn't mean to sell you everything in the boundaries, because after all, I didn't write that I'm selling you a bik'ah, I only wrote that I'm selling you a field. So it's only just one particular section of that valley. That's Rav Nachman's ruling. And here also we ask, Hechidame, what are the particulars of the case? If you're living in a place where people use language precisely, and the word sadeh only means a small field, and the word bik'ah only means a large valley, a whole area. In that case, since I wrote sadeh, I'm selling you a field, so obviously I only sold you a field within that valley, and I'm not selling you the entire valley. And that would be obvious. Rav Nachman wouldn't even have to say that. But if I'm living in a place where people refer to a valley with the word sadeh, that sadeh has two meanings in this place. Sometimes sadeh means just a small field, and sometimes means the entire area. In that case, since I said sadeh, and sadeh can mean the entire area, and I gave borders that are the entire big area, then the halacha would be that I sold you the entire valley, not just one field. And so Rav Nachman's ruling would not be true in that case. So how do we answer? La sirichadika de sadeh karu le sadeh, ulbika bika, bika nam de bika karu la sadeh. Maudetema kule zabin le. Kamashmalan midahava le lemechtav le la shayerit bizbine ilen kodamai kelum velakatab le shemamina shiure shier. So Rav Nachman is teaching us this case regarding a place where most people use the language precisely, and they call a field, and they call the bika a bika, and they don't use the word field for a valley. But there is a minority of people that will call a valley a sadeh. They just say sadeh in a general way. It can mean, most of the time it means a field, but sadeh can also mean the entire expanse. So I might have thought, since he used the word sadeh, and the sadeh in a minority of people use the word sadeh in an expansive way, and I gave big boundary markers, then that means I'm selling you the entire valley. I might have thought that. And that's why Rav Nachman has to come and teach that, since if I was selling the entire valley, I should have written, I am not withholding for myself in this sale anything at all. And I didn't write that. That means I am withholding something for myself, and I'm only selling you one field, and the rest of it I am keeping for myself. So now we'd have, in the name of Rav Nachman, two laws, one regarding a house and one regarding a field. But it's basically the same principle. So why do we need both? וסריחה דיש מינן בית משום דהה תשמישתה לחוד והה תשמישתה לחוד. אבל בקעה דכולה חדה תשמישתה היא אמה כולה זבין לה. So I need both, because if he only taught me the law regarding the apartment that's within a big building and said that when I say I'm selling you a bayit, it means only the apartment and not the big building, even though I made the big borders. So I would say, yeah, over there, that's true, because this usage is separate and that usage is separate. This phrase means something a little different than the way we quoted it before. Here, both are, all the apartments are being used for residence. People are living there. But these are separate apartments for separate families. So that's what it means, that these are separate usages by separate families. So I would say, I might have thought, if I didn't have the second law, that in the case of different apartments within a building where they're being used by different people, when I say I'm selling you a bayit within a building, apartment building, though I'm including only that one apartment and not the whole thing, because each one is being used by separate people. However, when it comes to a valley where it's all one usage, you look out at a valley and you don't see any walls or separations. All you see is an expanse of wheat, and you're planting wheat across the entire thing, right? I mean, you could put different crops, but you could put all the same crop in that big valley. So I might have thought that since it's all one usage for one same purpose, that if I say I'm selling you a sadeh within the big valley and I give the borders of the big valley, that means I'm selling you the whole thing because it's all one usage. So that's why Rav Nachman has to tell me the second law to say, even though it's one usage, still I'm only selling you that one field and not the entire thing. If Rav Nachman only taught me the law regarding the valley, I would say he had to give the big borders because it's very difficult to give borders of just one field. There's no obvious markers in the field to delineate, I'm only selling you this particular field and not the whole thing. So there, I might have thought that's because it's difficult to delineate, that's why he used the bigger borders. But in that case, I meant to sell you only one field. And the fact that I wrote bigger borders is because it's difficult to delineate. However, regarding a house, an apartment within a building where it's easy to delineate, I can easily say, you get the apartment on this floor, from this wall until that wall. So since it would be easier, it would be easy to delineate borders, and I didn't delineate borders, I might have thought that means I'm selling you the entire apartment building. After all, it's a place where some people do call bayit, use the word bayit to refer to an entire building. And that's what Rav Nachman has to say. Not so. In that case also, because I said bayit, and that the usual usage of bayit is just an apartment, and I didn't say that I'm not withholding anything for myself, so the law is the same in the valley and in the apartment building, that I only sell you one part of it and not the entire thing. Next, we have a follow-up question that will relate to Rav Nachman's law. Keman azla ahad amar Rav Mari bere de bat Shemuel misheme de Abaye. According to whom, as the following statement said, that it was said by Rav Mari, the grandson of Shemuel, in the name of Abaye. He said, Haiman de mizabene le midi lechabre sarich lemichtav le la shayerit bizbine ilen kodamai kelum. Keman, someone who sells something to his friend has to write, I am not withholding anything for myself. If I mean that I really want to sell the whole thing, I have to write, I'm selling you the entire whatever building, the entire field, whatever I'm selling. And if I don't put that in, then that means I am withholding something for myself. And the answer is, Rav Nachman Amar Rabba bar Abu. This statement follows Rav Nachman in the name of Rabba bar Abu, as we just proved earlier when we said Hechidami, what kind of case is it, right? If he uses language precisely, it's obvious. If it's a place that they don't use language precisely, then it's not obvious. And in the end, he said it's a place where some people use the language this way and some people use the language that way. And the key factor in knowing what they meant is, because he didn't, if I don't write, I'm withholding for myself, I'm not withholding for myself anything, then that means I am withholding for myself something. So if I want to really sell the entire thing, I have to put in that phrase. So we see that the statement follows the opinion of Rav Nachman. Hahud amar lechavre ad bechiya mizabenana lach. Someone told his friend, I am going to sell you the land of the house of Chiyah. He owns some land, and one section of the land is called something, land of the house of Chiyah. But the problem is he had two pieces of land that were both called land of the house of Chiyah. Maybe he bought it from Chiyah, or for whatever reason it's called that. So now, does that mean he has to sell and give both of them, or he meant only one of them? Amar Rav Ashi, Chada amar le, Tarte lo amar le. Rav Ashi says, look at the language. He says ar'a, which is a singular noun. That means he's only selling him one field. So therefore, even though he has two fields that go by the same description, because he says I'm selling you land, not lands, field, not fields, therefore he only has to give over one of them. However, if I said I'm selling you fields, and I didn't say how many, maybe I have a lot of fields. It could be they're all called bechia or whatever. I'm just selling you, I said fields, and I didn't say how many. I own 10 fields, and I said I'm selling you fields. But I didn't say how many, so we assume two, because the minimum of plural is two. You can't, you prove that I meant 5 or 7. So if I just wrote plural, that means you only get 2. And if I write a deed and I said, I'm selling you all of my fields, well, in that case, I have to actually hand over all of my fields. But I don't have to give you the orchards and vineyards, because orchards and vineyards are not called fields. Fields are for planting grains, and orchards and vineyards are for planting fruits and grapes, and so that's a separate thing. And if I write in the deed, I am selling you all of my land property. That's the word zihara. In that case, that will include orchards and vineyards, but it will not include houses and slaves, because that's just, so I'm selling you lands, but that doesn't include structures and people that I own. However, if I say I'm selling you all of my property, well, then that does include even houses and even slaves. So we're clearing up language that are in deeds and contracts, and sometimes the language is not so clear. So this is a guideline we have to figure out what did people mean and how did people use language. And so these are giving us clear definitions of what these various words include and don't include. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.